Good evening. I'm calling the Oceanside Planning Commission for Monday, September 13th to order. I'm going to read our script on how we conduct our meetings now before we go to the rest of the agenda. So this meeting will be conducted in accordance with Governor Newsom's Executive Order 2920 relating to the COVID-19 virus. Due to applicable public health orders, the city council chambers are open to the public with masks required for unvaccinated individuals in all indoor areas of City Hall. Members of the public are encouraged to listen and watch the meeting via Zoom, by computer, or by phone. The meeting can also be watched on KOCT channel, KOCT channel 19, AT&T channel 99, or by live streaming on KOCT's webpage, although there is a slight time delay. To provide comments in person in the chambers during the meeting, if you'd like to comment on the agenda in person, you may do so by filling out a speaker slip. To participate via Zoom from computer, we have on the agenda front page how you do that by joining the meeting with the Zoom meeting ID. Please make sure you're muted and your video is turned off. When you join the meeting, you must register your first and last name, or you may not be allowed to participate. You may also participate via Zoom from a phone using a landline or your mobile phone. To provide comments via Zoom or phone during the meeting, if you'd like to comment on an item, you may do so by sending an email to the Planning Commissioner staff. They must be received by 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting. With that, we'll go to call to order and followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm sorry, I did the call of order. So if I could get the audience to rise and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll do roll call now. City Planner?
Good evening. Chair Rosales.
Present.
Vice Chair Morrissey indicated he has a flight delay and he may not be able to make the meeting. So at this point, we will mark him as absent. Commissioner Goodkind, I believe, is participating by Zoom.
Present.
Commissioner Balma.
Present.
Commissioner Custer. Here. Commissioner Hayes, I believe, is also participating via Zoom.
Yes, present.
And finally, Commissioner Rains, I believe, is participating via Zoom.
That's correct.
So, Mr. Chairman, you have 6 members, 3 participating via Zoom, and then 3 in the chambers. You do have a quorum tonight.
Great, thank you. So communications on matters not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers that want to speak on this item?
Mr. Chairman, there's no requested speakers.
Great, thank you. We'll go to approval of minutes from our prior meeting, which was last held on July 26th. I'll do a roll call approval unless somebody has any edits.
Nope.
Don't see any. So starting with my left, Commissioner Custer.
I approve.
Commissioner Goodkind.
Approve.
Commissioner Rains.
Approve.
Commissioner Balma.
Approve.
Commissioner Hayes.
Approve.
And I too vote yes, approval. Consent calendar items, we do not have any on tonight's agenda, nor any items under transportation items. So we'll move into the public hearing items. We have one item tonight. Item 4 is consideration of a tentative map, development plan, and conditional use permit to construct a mixed-use development with 10 residential condominium units located at 2100 El Camino Real within the Fire Mountain Neighborhood Planning Area. The applicant is Geneva Geneva Holdings LLC. We'll start with disclosures. Commissioner Custer?
I read the report, went and looked at the site, and I know the area.
Thank you. Commissioner Goodkind?
I drove by the site and read the staff report.
Commissioner Rains?
I am familiar with the area and I read the staff report.
Commissioner Obama?
Staff report, I drove by the site and very familiar with the area.
Commissioner Hayes?
Likewise, I drove by the site, very familiar with the area, and I read the staff report.
Same disclosures, very familiar with the area. Read the staff report and did a drive-by. Scott Nightingale will be doing our presentation. Good evening, Scott.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission, and members of the public. I'm Scott Nightingale, Senior Planner from the Planning Division, here to present agenda item number 4 for the proposal to construct a mixed-use development consisting of 10 residential condominium units and an attached 875-square-foot professional office space located on an approximate 0.48 acre site at 2100 South El Camino Real. The project is known as the Geneva Mixed-Use Development. Here's the scope of work. They plan on proposing a tentative subdivision to create a one-lot subdivision and to create the 10 airspace condominium units with the attached 875-square-foot commercial suite and various common open areas. The development plan will create the construction of the actual buildings themselves. It'll be configured in a mixed condominium townhome type design. There'll be 2 detached buildings, one that will just solely house the residential component to the west, and then the other one will be the commercial component on the bottom floor, as well as the second and the multifamily development. Each of the attached 3-story townhomes would consist of approximately 1,278 square feet, with one of the units, which is Unit 7, consisting of 1,332 square feet. And each of these units would include a 2-bed and 2-bath configuration. The conditional use permit is needed and is a request to allow the construction of a vertical mixed-use project consisting of 2 3-story buildings at a height of 30.4 feet. A conditional use permit for a mixed-use development is required for projects proposed within the commercial professional zone, which this is located, as outlined in zoning ordinance section 1120. Here's an image of the site. As I said earlier, the site is located at 2100 South El Camino Real. It is zoned CP, professional commercial, and is surrounded by other CP type zoning to the south. You have commercial offices directly located to the south. You have a multifamily apartment complex just to the west, a religious facility zoned for PS, public space, located to the north, and some more commercial professional properties, several being vacant, and one being a memory care senior facility just directly to the east. Here's an image of the site looking from Geneva and Basil Street, just right across from the multifamily apartments. Like I said earlier, the project is a vacant site. It's comprised of just a little bit under half an acre. And it's located on the northeast corner of Basil and South El Camino Real. The site does have an elevation difference running from El Camino Real up to Geneva, a topo difference of about 10 to 15 feet in elevation. Here's an image of the site plan. It'll be configured at a motor court type design with 2-car garages on the ground floor. The proposed subdivision would establish a density of approximately 20 dwelling units per acre, which comes out to 10 units. where the permitted density for any mixed-use type development is 29, so it is well under the density. The undergrounding of electrical utilities is required within the public right-of-way because of the subdivision ordinance, section 901G, which requires undergrounding for all projects of 4 or more units. Here's an image of the conceptual landscape plan, which provides a plant palette that embraces the coastal environment by utilizing plant designs that balance and complement the site as well as the neighborhood. They're proposing low-lying shrubs around the frontage with also some canopy trees, which will also meet our urban forestry requirement. Here's an image of the floor plan layout for pretty much all the units. You have a 2-car garage on the bottom floor, which goes up to the living room and kitchen area, and then the actual 2-bedroom sleeping quarters on the 3rd floor. This contemporary architecture design draws from many of the eclectic type designs within the neighborhood. It has a kind of a, like I said, eclectic type design of older 70s style to some newer craftsman and contemporary designs. So they've tried to include a lot of those elements, and they've come up with a pretty nice design. The mixed-use development is an infill project because of the site's location within the high urbanized area. It mainly consists of a mix of multifamily apartments and office and civics and institutional uses. The required minimal commercial square footage in the mixed-use project is determined on a site variable basis, and staff work with the applicant to improve the location of the office as well as increase the size of the proposed office. And this is what we came up with. The proposed 10-unit condominium development with the attached commercial office suite would not only be part of a mixed-use project, but would provide individual ownership for the residential units, provide additional housing for the city's housing stock. The project would add a variety of existing housing types to the area, consisting of what's in the area, which is multifamily. The proposed mixed-use development meets the Oceanside zoning regulations, and the developer has opted not to propose any deviations which are permitted if they propose any type of mixed-use development. So they're staying within the zoning standards. Here's an image of the site, which you would see off of, I believe, Geneva Street. Staff finds the project consistent with the proposed development standards of the mixed-use development, as stated in the staff report. The proposed mixed-use development plan would be consistent with the zoning ordinance and also the mixed-use development plan, which is within section 3042 of the zoning ordinance, which regulates mixed uses. They have submitted a mixed-use development plan, which was attached with the project description, which lays out all the development standards, which are also consistent with the zoning standards. And this is a proposal rendering of what it would look like driving on down or up El Camino Real towards the northwest. There was a community outreach meeting that was hosted by the applicant via Zoom. No members of the public attended the meeting. I was on this Zoom meeting. I think I was the only person other than the applicant on the meeting. There was one comment letter that was received. That comment letter was basically questioning if the project met ADA standards, which per building code, it will have to get an actual building permit. The applicant responded to the concerned public member as well as staff, and we assured them that it will meet the ADA standards. And they sounded content with that. So with that, when reviewing the project, staff looked at the project based on the following: general plan land use compliance. The project achieves a balance of residential and commercial land uses with this proposed commercial mixed-use development, commercial and residential. Provides a good transition between the existing medium-density apartments which are in the area and the civic and commercial offices. The proposed project would assist in meeting the projected housing demand. The project applicant intends to pay the in lieu fees, which will help add to the city's affordable housing stock. And like I said earlier, it does meet the zoning ordinance as conditioned. As far as parking goes, they are providing 20 parking spaces for the residential, which are accommodated through the 2-car garages on the ground floor. The commercial component, based on the size, only requires 3 parking spaces. They are providing 5, so they are overparked. So they'll have 2 additional parking, which could be utilized for not only the commercial, but also in evening hours for guests. And lastly, the project meets the subdivision ordinance pursuant to section 401, the subdivision ordinance. This proposed subdivision has been prepared in a manner acceptable to the engineering division and the subdivision ordinance. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission by motion confirm issuance of the CEQA exemption and adopt Planning Commission Resolution 2021 P29 approving the tentative map, development plan, and conditional use permit to construct this project. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions on the sidebar here. The applicant is present, and they're available for questions as well. Thank you.
Scott, I had a question. Thanks for touching on the parking. I had a question about that. You covered it nicely. Thank you. Talk about the traffic and circulation, any impacts. I see it was covered in the staff report. Maybe you can touch on that real quickly.
Yeah, so the project, I believe, was under 200 additional daily trips from the vehicle miles traveled form that they submitted, the project information form. So with that, they weren't required to do a traffic study. The actual traffic that would be generated from this would be very minimal. And the traffic engineer that reviewed this was comfortable enough to state that the traffic study wasn't needed based on the basically no impact to the area.
And your second and last slide, before you went to the recommendation, had a bullet on housing and how this providing affordable units. So talk a little bit about that, the housing demand and affordability.
Sure. So the project is not providing affordable units within the development here. They're going to pay the project impact fee for the in lieu fee, which is needed right at the time of building permit. And so that'll help pay for any future affordable housing projects that the city will put in their pot at a later time. And we'll have to develop a project later on, similar to what we've been doing in all those affordable housing complexes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Louise.
I have one general question regarding how mixed use has kind of like evolved in our city. Because back in the very beginnings, and you were there, I think, too, Scott, when we started talking about mixed use, it was always the ground floor was going to be the commercial and above was going to be residential. Then it changed to like horizontal, but it was always based on the square footage of what the ground floor would be, and that would go, you could spread it out the other way. And now it seems like it's just a token. Not that I'm against this project, but I'm just kind of wondering, like, how does this evolve in our city now? Because mixed use now is more like just a small percentage of what they're trying to build. How did it go?
Chair and Commissioners, it's a very good question. And with the recent changes in our commercial landscape, both due to COVID, the Great Recession, and particularly with e-commerce, what we do is we take a site-by-site analysis of the viability of commercial on that site. And we do look at achieving ground floor commercial along the streetscape. Again, if it seems viable, if it's visible to the public, if it has good access for the public, et cetera. In this particular case, given the geography and the setback from El Camino Real, we were happy with just having office commercial at the entrance. As Scott noted, we worked with the applicant to relocate that office. I believe it was more towards the back of the project, and we felt it should be out front along the access. Getting away from this particular project, if the street is very active and if there's good access, visibility, both pedestrian and vehicle access, we have been requiring full commercial facades, but we did not in this case.
Okay. So it's just based by sites. Like you really analyze where this construction wants to go and you look at it just kind of logically, not just what the rule might say. You base it on project to project.
Exactly, and we have a mixed-use project out on North River Road, which the commercial units are vacant, and it's been there for years, and we want to avoid that. And given the location of that site and the lack of visibility, the design of it, et cetera, we didn't think that was a good approach on that particular site. So we think this over a lot. It's a very good question. It's a very important question. I think a lot of it is dependent upon the site itself and just whether we believe that it actually makes sense to require commercial. One thing we're also doing is not requiring the commercial units be used for commercial uses, just that they not be used for private residential uses. So we've allowed developers to put in perhaps an HOA office, a real estate office, a yoga workout room, a dog room, those kind of uses, with the idea being that if it's designed for commercial, form-based, so generally speaking, that would be higher ceilings, bigger glass facades, doors out front instead of recessed, a smaller setback. Eventually, if the commercial rents are there, commercial rents will pay more than residential. If the commercial rents are available, the space will convert to commercial. So we're doing a lot of what we call form-based commercial on these ground floor facades for mixed use. So sorry about the long answer, but it's an interesting topic.
That was good. And I know that along that street, there's a lot of vacant commercial spaces. So that's when I saw this project, I could understand how you evolved and how you went this way, but just kind of want to know so the city still is pursuing as much commercial as possible when it can and when the site justifies it, but just not in this situation did it work out.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to put it. We push for as much commercial as we think is viable. We have to have some because otherwise it's pure residential and it's a commercial zone. To be somewhat candid, a lot of our developers are coming in and they would love to just do pure residential. The market is just really challenging on commercial. Not all sites, but a lot of sites. And so it's a ongoing discussion that we're having with a lot of mixed-use developments.
Very good. Commissioner Custer, any questions?
No, I don't have.
I can't see the other commissioners, so I'll call them out. Commissioner Hayes, anything for staff?
I just raised my hand too, so good timing.
Maybe we can bring you up here in a second. Just hang on a minute so we can see you. But go ahead with your question while we're getting that ready.
Sure. The one thing I noticed on the staff report, one of the first things it talked about was the proximity to the Sprinter station. And I'm not sure if everybody else noticed this in driving the site, but there's no sidewalk on that side of the road, on that side of El Camino Real, connecting to the Sprinter station. So I was just wondering if we've been thinking about improving that access, since there are a lot of residences up there. It's a bit of a steep walk up that piece of El Camino, but I think not having a sidewalk on that side and the crossings not being really close to be able to get to the other side even to use the sidewalk creates some access issues. So any thoughts on that?
Hang on, we're getting your answer ready.
Commissioner Hayes, that's a great question. Yeah, we understand there are some limitabilities to access on that portion of El Camino Real. We probably would have to talk to the Public Works Director to see if there's anything in the works for any public improvements there, but we can look into that.
Yeah, I almost, when I was driving it earlier today, I almost, there was somebody that was walking not necessarily all the way in the bike lane, and I had to swerve to avoid from hitting him as he was walking up the hill. So it would be great if we could do something to improve the access for pedestrians.
Very good. Any other questions, Commissioner Hayes? Okay. Commissioner Rains or Goodkind? I don't see your hand, so.
I was just, this is Commissioner Goodkind. I just had kind of overlapping question that I think was covered by Commissioner Obama's question related to the mixed use. I was really curious what the minimum commercial space requirement would be to allow this to proceed as mixed use. And it sounds like if I understood Mr. Hunt's answer, it is kind of what it ended up being would be the minimum. Is that accurate, Mr. Hunt? It's like you guys kind of squeezed it down to as small as it could be to keep this mixed use.
Chair and Commissioners, I think it's accurate to say that we look to maximize the amount of commercial square footage, but we do a site-specific analysis based on viability. There is no formula. There is no percentage. There is no policy promulgated on a percentage. There's certainly no percentage in our general plan or in our zoning ordinance. So it's a site-specific analysis.
Understood. And if this, would it have been possible to request a variance and to make this all residential?
The applicant could have requested a zone amendment to change it to residential, yes.
A zone amendment, okay. Because I share your concern about the vacant inventory is excessive for commercial real estate. So hopefully they'll find a use for that little space. But that's all. That's the only question that I had. Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Rains, anything for staff?
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. City Planner, we've had Vice Chair Morrissey join us. I'm going to have him do disclosures on this item. Tom?
No report.
No disclosures?
No disclosures.
Thank you. Good. This is a public hearing, and I understand the applicant is with us this evening. Applicant, if you would come forward if you'd like to do a presentation or just be available for questions. It's your time.
Sure. I'll be very brief because the conversations and the presentation was very thorough. So I just want to thank the senior planner and the entire staff for their feedback.
If you could start by introducing yourself.
I'm sorry, I jumped right in. Noam Newman, owner of the property on Geneva Holdings, LLC.
Thank you.
Sure. I just wanted to thank the staff for their feedback. I know we did one submission with the professional office space, and then we relocated to the other side. And I think the staff was absolutely correct in moving it over to the more prominent corner of Basel and South El Camino Real. And I just think it improved the project tremendously, and I'm very enthusiastic about it. So I have my technical team with me if there are any technical questions, but just wanted to thank staff for their time and feedback.
Thank you, sir. And any questions by commissioners for the applicant? Don't see any hands raised. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
So we'll go to the public. Any slips to speak on this item from the public?
Mr. Chairman, there's no public request to speak on this item.
Great, thank you. So we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commissioners. Your choice if you have any other just questions for staff or the applicant. Otherwise, looking for a motion here.
First off, I want to commend the applicant. It's a great-looking project, and that site's just been sitting there for so long with nothing. And so thank you for, taking your money and your time and your expertise to do something like this for Oceanside. I appreciate it. And it'll bring more housing for the city. So I'd like to make a motion to confirm issuance of a categorical exemption per CEQA guidelines, Article 19, Section 15332, and approve Planning Commission Resolution 2021 P29 for tentative map, development plan, and conditional use permit with all the findings given to us herein.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Commissioner Custer. Any further discussion, commissioners? Don't see any hands raised. So let's go to a roll call vote. I'll start with Commissioner Custer.
Yes.
Commissioner Goodkind?
Yes.
Commissioner Rains?
I vote to approve.
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear that.
I vote to approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Hayes?
Yes.
Commissioner Balma,
Yes.
Vice Chair Morrissey,
Yes.
and I too am a yes. City Planner?
We'll record that as 7 in favor, 0 against. The motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Good luck. Moving along on the agenda, we don't have anything listed on the agenda under appeal of city planner's determination. So we will go to discussion items, and we have 2 items this evening. The first is a presentation by Russ Cunningham, Principal Planner with the city, on the draft community vision document. City Planner, do you want us to do disclosures? I know it's not a public hearing item, it's more a discussion, but do you want us to do disclosures?
Mr. Chairman, it's really a discussion and comment item.
Okay.
So I think you can forego the disclosure.
Very good, thank you. Russ, the floor is yours, and then we'll follow that with public comments. So go ahead.
Chair Rosales, Commissioners, good evening. I'm Russ Cunningham with the city's Planning Division. I am one of 4 members of a, I like to think, very capable team of planners within our shop working on the general plan under the supervision of City Planner Hunt. And I want to acknowledge those teammates of mine, Rob Demohowski, Senior Planner. You've seen a fair amount of Rob of late. Rob shepherded the housing element through the local adoption process, and he's working with our consultant and housing and community development to get that document certified by the state of California. Shannon Vitale, and you see plenty of Shannon as well, bringing forward current projects for your review. Shannon is working on a specific component of this project that I'll talk about in a moment, and Stephanie Cervantes, Associate Planner, also working on a very specific but very important component of this project as well. We also have with us remotely members of our principal consultant team with Diet and Bhatia. We have Rajiv Bhatia, we have Allison, Gabri, and Helen joining us tonight, and they're in the wings. And if I say something really ridiculous or dumb, they may intervene and correct me. In April of 2019, this body recommended City Council approval of the first phase of the city's comprehensive general plan update, which introduced 2 new general plan elements addressing economic development and climate change mitigation. The economic development element, or EDE, and the Energy and Climate Action Element, or the ECAE, along with the city's first climate action plan. I'm pleased to share with you this evening our progress on the second phase of the general plan update and receive your questions and comments on a key project deliverable, the community vision. Reflecting public input, the findings of technical studies, and relevant state and regional priorities, the vision establishes themes and guiding principles that provide a framework for more detailed planning documents to come, and I'll speak to those in a moment. I intend to speak at a high level this evening because we think the vision should be able to speak for itself. We ask that you and the community members that are joining us tonight let us know where the document doesn't speak clearly for itself and how we can bring more clarity and consistency to it. The vision is neither a policy nor a regulatory document in and of itself. It is mostly intended to let community members and decision makers know where we're heading with this important, ambitious, and historic project. This is the city's first comprehensive general plan update in its history. We aren't asking the Commission to make a formal recommendation on the vision this evening, but rather to pose questions and offer suggestions that help make the vision as complete and accessible as possible. Our primary purpose tonight is to allow for public testimony and Planning Commission discussion on how effectively the vision articulates community values and priorities, and how well it illustrates the kind of city Oceanside strives to be in the future. I want to take just a moment to acknowledge what I'm sure is apparent to you based on the written testimony that you've received, that we have many stakeholders with an interest in the future of the South Mara Hills community. So I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that the vision speaks to this important priority. I want to note that it is an essential component of this general plan update. But I want to emphasize that our discussion tonight is focused on the vision document, which is broad in its scope and addresses issues on a citywide basis. So I'm hoping we can get feedback on the entire vision. I recognize that folks will have things to say about South Mara Hills, and we welcome that comment. I do want to clarify a few things. Well, let me just say, today I reread the vision and identified 5 references to farmland preservation, either direct or implicit references to farmland preservation in the vision, and hopefully you noticed that too. I also want to emphasize that there is no South Mara Hills community plan at the moment. There is a staff recommendation as reflected in a policy framework. There is direction from this body and from the City Council, and there will be future outreach on that very important component of the general plan update, and that will be forthcoming here in October. We intend to host a community workshop in October on this topic, and in the interim, folks can reach out to Project Manager Rob Dmowski with their questions, their comments, their concerns, all of which will be placed on the public record. So briefly, a little background and context. It's important to note that we didn't initiate this second phase of the GPU with an entirely blank canvas. The first phase provides important policy direction for this second and culminating phase. Both the EDE and the ECAE call for efficient land use through infill and redevelopment, enhanced mobility options, a diverse, integrated, and green local economy, housing opportunities for all segments of the community, and enhanced visual quality. And these are, again, policies that are guiding our development of this second phase. Other planning and regulatory documents informing this second phase include the Coast Highway Incentive District, which we hope will receive Coastal Commission certification before the end of the year, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, adopted, I believe, in 2019, and the O-Arts Master Plan. Phase 2 of the GPU will reinforce the goals of these recently adopted documents, introduce other complementary goals, and outline actions meant to ensure that these goals are realized. With respect to this second phase, it is very multifaceted. It involves the updating of all general plan elements with the exception of the EDE and ECAE, 2 focused planning efforts addressing South Mara Hills and the city's major east-west commercial corridors, an active transportation plan which will update and consolidate the city's pedestrian and bicycle master plans, a trails master plan which will identify ways, among other things, it will identify ways to improve connectivity between our recreational facilities and the neighborhoods they serve, and an update of the Climate Action Plan, which will ensure that the city remains on track to reduce its carbon footprint in a manner consistent with California's emissions reduction targets. You are aware of the progress that we've made. We have completed background studies. We have engaged in nearly a year of robust public outreach. We have brought before you, as I said before, a policy framework for the South Mara Hills area, and we have brought before you a draft updated housing element that has since been adopted. I think it's also worth noting that we have also secured a substantial amount of grant funding for this project. Roughly 40% of our project budget is covered by state grant funding from Caltrans and Housing and Community Development. So just to provide a little bit of an illustrative here, here is our city. It's a little difficult to see, but there is an orange boundary line that shows the planning area of the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan. I think I'll take the opportunity, based on some of the input we received from the commission tonight on Scott's project, to say that with respect to mixed use, residential, and this tension, given market conditions and the relatively low demand we see for commercial floor area, we are exploring, as part of the Smart and Sustainable Corridors specific plan, the prospect of standalone residential allowances within portions, appropriate portions of these east-west corridors, Mission Avenue, Oceanside Boulevard, Vista Way, very similar to what this body recommended and what the City Council ultimately approved as the Coast Highway Incentive District, which has the nodal areas that are mixed use and the avenue areas that can allow for, they don't preclude mixed use or commercial development, but they allow for standalone residential. So we're going to take a high-level look at the information, the analysis, the commentary that has informed the vision to this point and will continue to inform the project as we go forward. Since the spring of last year, the project team has built a very well-received webpage, hosted over 50 meetings with community members and subject matter experts. We've conducted several online surveys. We've engaged dozens of individuals in ad hoc dialogue. We've met with a variety of community groups, and we've built an interested parties list that now numbers over 1,600 residents, business owners, and other stakeholders. We could spend a great deal of time, more time than we have, detailing what we've heard from our community members. We've received thousands of comments from hundreds of people. So I do sometimes feel like in these summaries, we're shortchanging those who have made the effort to participate. But I do want to speak to some of the high level, more prevalent comments that we've heard from the community through this outreach process. There is an abiding concern about the safety and security of public spaces, with folks telling us we want to spend time in the public realm. We're just sometimes not comfortable doing so. So that reflects some anxiety over homelessness. It reflects some anxiety over crime. And they want us to do what we can to create physical spaces in the public realm that feel safe and that are comfortable to be in. And it's a little bit chicken and egg, right? Because you have to create those conditions to get people in those spaces. But creating those conditions requires a market for whatever it is going to go into that space, whether that's commercial development, housing, or just public realm improvements. So we're looking at ways to bring eyes on the street. We're looking at ways to maintain our public spaces in good repair. We're looking at ways to better illuminate our public spaces. And we're working with the police department and typically general plans are not addressing law enforcement services, staffing, things like that. But we are working in a very interdisciplinary way with OPD to understand these issues and understand what we can do in partnership with OPD to address them. Our constituents want to see us preserve single-family neighborhoods, and this means not only preserving the character of the neighborhoods themselves, but also addressing those edge conditions between districts that may be commercial or may have higher intensity that abut these single-family areas, ensuring that the edge conditions in these areas provide a good transition between higher intensity areas and the single-family areas. Folks want to preserve our remaining open space, our natural habitat, and farmland. They want to enhance visual quality, and they recognize the linkage between enhancing visual quality and creating spaces that are safer and more secure. They want to expand the active transportation network, and that was a point of discussion with Scott's item, right? Like, could we extend sidewalk down to the transit station? That's something that we can look at as part of the active transportation plan and what will now constitute the circulation element. Folks want us to leverage key assets to grow and diversify the local economy. That's our coast. That's the South Morro Hills area and the prospect of agritourism in that area. It is our transportation hub, the Oceanside Transit Center, a means of getting visitors in and out of the city of Oceanside. And then folks want to see us enhance the resilience of both the natural and the built environment and reduce risk of natural hazard. I've left a lot out. There's a lot more that people have to say. I will note that with respect to housing, not everyone's enthusiastic about bringing additional housing to Oceanside, but most people recognize we have an obligation, statutory and perhaps moral obligation, to provide more housing. And what they're telling us is that that housing really needs to serve the full spectrum of the community, all socioeconomic groups within our community, and that's something that we're going to work very hard at. We could go down a very deep rabbit hole very quickly on the findings of the tech studies. Given their breadth and depth, we will not do that. I'll just point out that 5 separate technical studies have been prepared addressing existing conditions, trends, constraints, strengths, opportunities, vulnerabilities, that together give us a comprehensive sense of where our city is today and to some extent how we got to where we are. So those tech studies look at local economy and market forces. They look at land use and community resources. They look at mobility, our mobility network. They look at our environmental resources. And there is a study that is focused entirely on the study area of the Smart and Sustainable Corridors specific plan. I am happy to talk about any component of these technical studies. There's a lot of great information in there. These studies are posted on our project webpage, onwardoceanside.com. If you've gotten a look at them, great. If you haven't and you want to cut to the chase, in every one of these studies, there is a section devoted to a particular topic, and at the end of each of those sections, there is an analysis of what are called key planning considerations and issues. And so there's a lot of material here, many, many pages, but if you really want to get the gist of the key findings of these documents, I would look to those planning issues and considerations. So it's important to note that the state has established guidelines for the updating of general plans, and these guidelines reflect state priorities that counties and cities are expected to support through local goals and policies and actions. So in short, the city is expected to do its part to accommodate growth and change in ways that align with the state's emphasis on sustainability and equity. This includes promoting infill and redevelopment and making efficient use of existing infrastructure. It includes protecting natural and working lands, as well as cultural and historic resources, mitigating and adapting to climate change, and ensuring that historically underserved communities are not unduly burdened by health hazards, limited access to essential goods and services, deficient infrastructure, substandard housing, et cetera. This is what we call environmental justice. And this is specifically a topic we are to address in our general plan. The city also has an important role in facilitating Sandag's vision of a regional mobility network that provides for fast, fair, and clean transportation. They released a draft of their updated regional plan recently. We furnished comments on that draft document. There will be an environmental document released fairly soon that studies the impacts of the regional plan, and we should, in a year's time, have an updated regional plan that, again, is promoting fast, fair, and clean transportation, along with sustainable growth and development that really make the mobility network as accessible and as efficient as possible. So I'm not going to delve down into the level of the guiding principles, guiding principles. There are 18 of those guiding principles, but I am going to take a moment to speak to the organizing themes, as these organizing themes will essentially serve as the titles of the updated general plan elements. We are taking a different but not unprecedented approach to essentially the naming of the general plan elements. Not unprecedented. There are several communities in California that have gone this route, and several of those general plans that have taken this interesting approach are award-winning, including the city of Redlands. That's probably the most recent example if you want to take a look at something that has given us some inspiration. So we believe that this approach highlights the city's uniqueness in ways that the standard topic areas do not, as titles or general plan elements. We believe that this approach responds specifically to community values and priorities and really makes affirmative statements about what we're trying to achieve. We're not just addressing land use, we're trying to render land use more efficient and more compatible. So we're really trying to signal what values and what priorities we're trying to achieve in these different general plan elements. And we will not fail to address all of the state prescribed topic areas. So these include, and you're all familiar with this, land use, circulation, conservation and open space, safety, noise, and I mentioned environmental justice. We also have a community facilities element adopted in 1990. We'll be updating that, or the topic of community facilities, within the context of these organizing themes. One other benefit here is efficiency. We're taking essentially 8 separate topics, state mandated, and topics that the city has an abiding interest in, and we're consolidating that into 6 elements, which should alleviate some of the redundancy and make these documents much more reader-friendly and much more accessible. So let's take a look at those themes. So we will have a remarkable community element, and this will be an opportunity for us to showcase what is unique and special about Oceanside and what needs to be preserved and enhanced to keep Oceanside unique and special. So the vision for this element is this: Oceanside will leverage its unique assets to promote quality of life, economic activity, visual quality, and a positive brand. Secondly, efficient and compatible land use. The vision here, and I'll say that this, as is probably pretty obvious, this will address the state prescribed topic of land use. And the vision here is one of the city accommodating future growth through infill and redevelopment, creating vibrant urban spaces while preserving the integrity of existing single-family neighborhoods and farmland and open space and sensitive habitat. Physical, social, and digital connections will address the topic of circulation, but it will also address what has emerged as a priority for our community members, which is social connections and digital connections. So we'll be looking at mobility, we'll be looking at social gathering, and we'll be looking at how we connect our residents to one another and how we help to connect them to the rest of the world. Vital and sustainable resources will address the topics of open space and conservation. The theme here is natural resources, including designated open space and natural habitat, and farmland being preserved for future generations. Safe and resilient environment speaks to the city proactively addressing the community's vulnerability to both natural and human-induced hazards, including those exacerbated by climate change. So this is where we'll address the state-prescribed topic of safety. And then finally, healthy, livable, and equitable community. We will address the topics of noise here, as well as topics addressed under the broader theme or topic of community facilities. And the vision here is of Oceanside as a great place to pursue an active, enriching, and civically engaged lifestyle. All Oceansiders, regardless of economic status, will have access to adequate housing, mobility options, community facilities, and community services. And that last part is the environmental justice, social equity part. So in addition to getting your thoughts tonight on the vision, we ask that the commission and community members joining us tonight consider project alternatives, which are essentially different ways to achieve the vision. And this may be where Rajiv and his team are a better resource than I am on the topic of alternatives. But essentially, alternatives provide us with an opportunity for additional community input. They help to focus us in the direction of a preferred plan, and they address a CEQA requirement to essentially address a reasonable range of alternatives, including a no project alternative. What if we do nothing? What are the implications of that? So possible alternatives include a corridor-focused growth pattern, infill, and redevelopment, and I would say this is very much the direction that we are going. An alternative or a set of alternatives that looks at different scenarios within South Morrow Hills. And then perhaps an alternative that looks at the possibility of densification of single-family neighborhoods that could be coming due to state preemption of local zoning through legislation like Senate Bill 9. Now, some analysis has been done of Senate Bill 9. It may not be as drastic as some of us may assume. There's some indication that statewide, the provisions of SB 9 might only be applicable or really feasibly implemented on less than 10% of the single-family properties in the state of California. So this may not be as big a deal as we think, but it definitely merits more consideration. And as I said, we're working toward, with these alternatives, we're working toward a preferred plan which we can study through an EIR and ultimately bring forward for adoption. So here is a flow chart that kind of speaks to the alternative process, how we get to it by studying existing conditions, establishing a vision and guiding principles, getting your input on that vision and guiding principles, and then looking at alternatives that relate to land use, mobility, infrastructure, environmental considerations, design considerations, and then ultimately like the feasibility. Is it a possible alternative? Could it actually be realized? That leads to a preferred plan, and then ultimately, as I said, to our environmental review of what we ultimately end up with as a general plan update and its associated components. So our next steps here are to get in front of the City Council on the 6th of October, and I'm looking forward to inserting into my staff report input received from the Planning Commission and from the community tonight. We'll refine the vision. We'll begin to develop project alternatives and ultimately bring forward to this body and the City Council and to the community at large a project alternatives report, which we hope will lead us to a preferred plan. Meanwhile, we will continue to work on other components of this project, including the housing element update, the South Morrow Hills Community Plan and outreach on that plan, and the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan. And I'm going to close with a couple of thoughts on why we bother with long-range planning. And I'll begin by saying that our project team does not take for granted the city's support for long-range planning. We appreciate the resources the city has devoted to this project, and we're committed to delivering not only solid plans, but also clear pathways to implementation that provide the city with a good return on its investment in this project. We all recognize that change is inevitable, but it's important to remind ourselves that change happens whether we plan for it or not. When we don't plan for change, we tend to get what we get, essentially, and often without sufficient information or resources to effectively respond or adjust to those changes. And I think we've seen that at the global level, right on down to the local level. So when we don't plan, sometimes we find ourselves back on our heels, and that's not where we want to be. So since the adoption of the first phase of this project back in 2019, we've seen a global pandemic, which has had disproportionate impacts on seniors, working class households, communities of color, and certain economic sectors. We've seen the effects of climate change become more profound globally and right here in Oceanside. We've seen the state's housing crisis deepen. We've seen the nature of work change profoundly for many people in the workforce. At the same time, that's all kind of negative. At the same time, we've seen Oceanside further diversify the local economy, implement smart growth, address homelessness in resourceful and humane ways, explore solutions to coastal erosion, and display extraordinary resilience in the face of COVID-19. So there's been a lot of change over the last 2 years, some of it positive, some of it not so positive, some of it anticipated, a lot of it not anticipated. So we think that acknowledging and understanding this change can help us anticipate and prepare for future change before changes lead to points of no return and to crisis situations. So a lot has changed in Oceanside since we adopted the noise element, the safety element, and the environmental resources element in the mid-1970s. A lot has changed in Oceanside since we adopted the land use element in 1986. These documents are no longer responsive to, and frankly, not particularly relevant because they're not responsive to existing conditions and emerging trends. And they're not particularly consistent with those other planning documents that I mentioned earlier that have been recently adopted. So this project is about kind of meeting the moment, addressing issues as they exist today, and also syncing up our long-range planning documents into a cohesive and coherent whole. So we see this as allowing for steady leadership, allowing for consistent decision-making that reflects agreed upon community values and priorities. Are we going to plan our way out of all disagreement and controversy? No, but we certainly can bring more clarity and more accountability to the decision-making process. So I thank you for your time. I look forward to your comments as well as comments from our community members.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you for that very thorough presentation, well thought out and comprehensive. And thank you for also acknowledging the team members around you that had a part in this. I think that's a good point you made. Any questions for Russ? We spent some time on this, but I'll look for some early questions, or you want to go right into the public comments and see what we have going on there. Commissioners online, anything you'd like to weigh in with Russ before we, again, we can come back. This is a back and forth process. Or do you like to go to the public at this point?
I do have.
I have no comments. I'd like to hear from the public.
Great.
I just have a question. The one question which you did touch on was about SB 9 and how that will change. I mean, it hasn't passed, so we don't really know. I understand that. But will that have a significant, do you anticipate change in the single-family zoning that you're hoping to maintain?
Thank you.
From where you're going right now, do you think that will have a dramatic shift if it passes?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Custer. It does create a little anxiety for us, to be perfectly honest, because we believe, established some consensus with the community that we will grow within our commercial corridors through infill and redevelopment, and we will concurrently do what we can to protect the integrity of our single-family neighborhoods. And that is our intention at the local level. There's not a lot we can do about what might happen at the state level, but there may be opportunities for us if SB 9 and other legislation is passed that preempts single-family zoning. There are things that we could perhaps do with development standards, et cetera, that would help in the face of that to maintain the existing character of these areas, and that's something we'll be exploring.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, let's go to the public. City Planner, Scott, or Russ, I'll look to you to help us walk through, I'm sure, quite a few public comments that are eager to weigh in this evening.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we have 7 or 8 public speakers who've requested to speak by Zoom, and I'll ask for Scott Nightingale to help us coordinate that.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. As Jeff stated, yeah, we have 7 speakers that are requesting to speak via Zoom. Our first 3 speakers, Diane Nygaard, Margaret Lowe, and Bridget Dolkus. You guys are in the queue here. First speaker will be Diane Nygaard. Please unmute yourself and speak clearly into the microphone. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Diane Nygaard, representing Preserve Calavera and our 4,600 North County families. This vision statement is, of course, very important. As Russ said, it sets the framework for the entire general plan to follow. It'd be helpful if this was actually done at the beginning of the process, but we're happy it's being done tonight before anything else is actually locked into place. I'm going to assume that you've all read our written comments that you should have received a couple of days ago. So I'm not going to repeat that, except to reaffirm a few things. And that is that we really think this is moving the right direction towards smart growth and sustainability. But with that, there are 3 key specific areas where we provided some more detail in our comments, and we think that are really critical to be emphasized in this vision. The first is protection of our natural lands. San Diego County has already lost 95% of our historic wetlands. Preserving our natural lands that are left is critical. And to us, that includes a real commitment to adopt our sub-area plan, which is a piece of the regional conservation plan. We see that as making that commitment is part of the overall vision. Secondly, preservation of farmland. Russ said he found 5 references in the vision to preserving farmland. Yes, there are such statements, but I think the real key is that the agricultural use, protecting the agricultural use of those lands is actually a priority. Not development, not all of the other things associated with it, but protecting agricultural use is a priority. And third, responding to climate change. This is really the critical challenge of our generation. This vision needs to say that. It needs to acknowledge that this really is a critical priority at this time, and that making sure that that's integrated in the rest of our decisions is really essential. And lastly, I just wanted to comment on alternatives. Of course, we don't yet have a preferred project, so it's hard to say what alternatives should be to the preferred project, but certainly the framework identifies a clear direction. And of course, CEQA requires that alternatives be defined once you've looked at the environmental impacts and you specifically find alternatives to reduce those significant impacts. So it's very premature to lock those things in at this time. But that said, it's very clear that at least one alternative needs to be included, and that would address 2 of our 3 priority concerns. And that alternative would be to keep the current 2.5 acre agricultural zoning in place in all of South Laurel Hills. That really supports smart growth and makes it clear that preservation of the agricultural land use is an actual priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Next speaker.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Margaret Lowe.
Yes, the draft community vision is a plan that addresses the human community. My community, that is the community I want to live in, includes plants and animals. The community vision plan does not adequately address the natural communities in our city, the native plants and animals. A few months ago, I received from Russ Cunningham by email the draft sub-area plan, which addresses the natural communities in Oceanside. It is dated 2010. The plan is woefully out of date. It needs to be updated and revised. I urge the City Council to update and revise the sub-area plan to adequately preserve what's left of our natural communities before they're all gone. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next 2 speakers will be Bridget Dolkus and Natalie Shaporo. Bridget, please unmute your mic. I'm not seeing Bridget on here. Bridget, you mind unmuting your mic? If we can go back to her.
Yeah,
at the end
let's
there.
go to the next speaker. We
Okay,
can come
next
back.
speaker will be Natalie Shapiro.
Hello, hi everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, hi. So my name's Natalie Shapiro, Executive Director of Buena Vista Audubon Society in Oceanside. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and I'm commenting on behalf of the society on the draft community vision. So the following are issues that are important to our membership. The first is open space protection. So although maintaining the health of diverse ecosystems is included in the vision, it should be placed as among the city's highest priorities. In addition, the vision should include the goal of committing to approval of the multiple habitats conservation sub-area plan for the city of Oceanside. In 2010, the draft sub-area plan was prepared, but has not yet been approved by the council. It is vital that the city approve the sub-area plan for the long-term protection and sustainability of our natural resources. The next is climate change. The vision recommends that housing and employment growth be concentrated within existing urbanized areas to reduce car trips and greenhouse gas emissions. Locating new development near jobs and services limits emissions as prescribed in the city's climate action plan. However, the draft South Laurel Hills Community Plan would allow sprawl development in agriculturally zoned lands that would exceed city caps on greenhouse gas emissions. So this plan needs to be revised, as others have mentioned. And then finally, the draft South Laurel Hills Community Plan itself. Although a vision goal is to preserve farmland, the Laurel Hills Plan would limit farming and allow development of clustered housing on land currently used for agriculture. The plan does not represent smart growth. It would allow housing in rural areas that does not promote walkability, transit use, or access to jobs and services. It needs to be revised to channel new development outside this agricultural area in the city's urbanized corridor. So we ask that this be revised. And that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Ellen Barlett, and then after that will be Dennis Martinick. Ellen, please unmute your mic.
Okay. Hello. I did send an email to the committee, but I also wanted to go ahead and read my comments as well. I'm a longtime Oceanside resident and a retired science teacher from Oceanside High School. My family lives in Oceanside, including my 8-year-old grandson, who represents the future of our cherished city. As the Planning Commission takes its next steps towards a new general plan, I am dismayed that the draft being presented ignores the community's longstanding wishes to protect farmland. Continuing down this path will ultimately be bad news for Oceanside. The will of the community was made perfectly clear when voters overwhelmingly voted to defeat Measure L. Local farming does matter. Agriculture in Oceanside is valuable. It creates jobs and keeps money within our community. The most recent 2020 crop statistics and annual report for San Diego County reported that agricultural values topped $1.8 billion for the first time since 2014 and just the third time in 30 years. Locally and globally, we have been experiencing very turbulent times. The climate crisis and the COVID pandemic have exposed the vulnerabilities in our transportation systems. We need to make our food supply systems more resilient. Producing and distributing food on the local level could help us weather disruptions of all kinds. Replacing farmland with housing will put Oceanside in conflict with the general plan. New housing should be built along our smart and sustainable corridors and not on farmland. We can meet our housing goals without building a single new home on farmland. The long-term financial sustainability of our community requires us to improve our job-to-housing ratio. Converting farmland to housing reduces jobs and increases housing, which moves us in completely the wrong direction. Farmland provides critical habitat for local wildlife populations, which promotes and protects biodiversity, while housing developments deplete local wildlife corridors and our native plant and wildlife populations. It is critical that we preserve and protect our farmland. It should not be given away to meet developers' self-interest. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Dennis Martnick, followed by Carol Jimenez. Dennis, unmute your mic.
Got it? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, this draft community vision outlines some really well-accepted planning principles, and promoting quality of life, economic prosperity, and social equity are worthwhile objectives. But to accomplish these objectives, it's necessary to grow and diversify your local economy and also promote long-term environmental and economic sustainability. So as the draft community vision points out, to accomplish these objectives, it's necessary to implement smart growth planning, where housing and employment growth are concentrated in your urbanized areas along Coast Highway and the major east-west commercial corridors. Also around the Sprinter Station and the downtown district, where you have adequate infrastructure. The problem with the South Morrow Hills community plan is that it conflicts with good planning practice and state and city policies and your own plans. It conflicts with Oceanside smart and sustainable corridors planned by encouraging sprawl housing development in an agriculture area with little infrastructure. It conflicts with the economic development plan by supporting clustered housing developments that will require huge investments in sewers, roads, and services that will have to be maintained with Oceanside taxpayer funds. It also eliminates agricultural jobs. That's going to worsen your Oceanside jobs to housing ratio. It conflicts with Oceanside's climate action plan by increasing the amount of vehicle miles traveled, resulting in increased greenhouse gases. And importantly, it also conflicts with the Oceanside agritourism strategic plan that was recently adopted, and if implemented, would result in a sustainable way for farmers to increase their revenues, increase tax revenues to the city, and mark Oceanside as a forward-thinking community. The city's been on the right track in planning and promoting a vision for South Morrow Hills agricultural area through agritourism. The first phase of the vision has been completed with a well-written plan by SMG Consulting that lays out a strategy for success. For the new commissioners, if you haven't read this, you should. It's an excellent plan. It lays it out, how you can really improve the South Morrow Hills area and get revenue to the farmers to encourage them to continue farming. The agritourism strategy provides a realistic and achievable direction to help owners increase the value of their crops and their land, while at the same time improving the competitiveness of Oceanside as a tourism destination. As a good alternative, a good preferred plan, the South Morrow Hills Community Plan should promote agriculture and agritourism, not sprawl housing development. Clustered housing should be removed from the plan. More effort should be made to implement the agritourism strategic plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis.
All right. Next speaker is Carol Jimenez, and we'll go back to Bridget after that. Carol Jimenez, please unmute your mic.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Well, I agree 100% with all of the previous speakers. My priority is maintaining quality of life and avoiding negative environmental impact. And the South Morrow Hills Community Plan includes the very same environmental impacts that the North River Farms CEQA identified as mitigable, including loss of important farmland, traffic and circulation, negative environmental impacts, unplanned population growth, and impact to sensitive and endangered species habitat. Conservation of important farmland is a priority. Important farmland as identified by the California Department of Conservation, which includes all of Morrow Hills. Morrow Hills farmland is rare, one of only 2 Mediterranean climate areas in the entire country. The loss of any of this land to housing is mitigable, period. Development in Morro Hills does not comply with Oceanside's climate action plan, actually the County of San Diego's climate action plan, or California's climate action plan. Oceanside's most recent climate action plan assumes no housing development in Morro Hills. The stated need to build housing on farmland to save farmland is a non sequitur. The erroneous premise that this land will be developed is persistently promoted by people who want this land to be developed. People easily identified as developers and landowners who want to sell their land to developers. The 2.5 acre detail contained in the zoning ordinance is consistently spun. Purposely omitted are the other restrictions in the ordinance that preclude this type of all over housing, as it would not meet the complete, whole, and entire land use ordinance, including the spirit of the ordinance or its intended effect. The premise that farming is no longer viable is also false. How can the City Council sign an ordinance approving growing cannabis, one of the fastest growing crops in the country, and also claim that farming is no longer profitable? Financial gain and conflict of interest is motivation for some local landowners to misrepresent the current state of agriculture. Further, we don't need housing development in this area to promote agritourism. The 2017 changes to the agricultural zoning ordinance allow literally every agritourism option identified in the South Morro Hills Community Plan. I also believe that the plan draft is inaccurate. It looks more like a developer's promotion than an unbiased overview of what the plan would factually do. There are no pictures of housing. The pre-plan survey, although likewise slanted, could not avoid exposing the citizens' desire for Morro Hills to remain agricultural. At last, the RHNA 6th cycle, with over a quarter of Oceanside households in the very low income category, the city needs to prioritize their housing efforts on actual low income housing and not moderate and above moderate housing, which is what any housing development in Morro Hills would be. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Were we able to get our first speaker up?
Yeah, and our last speaker, which we've been calling, is Bridget Dulkis. Bridget, are you there? Can you unmute your mic, please? I don't see her on the list of speakers, so I don't believe she's on the call.
Okay, thank you. We do have one person in the council chambers. I don't know if you wanted to come forward, if you wanted to speak on this item. Come on up, give us your name, and the mic's yours for 3 minutes.
You ready?
Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. My name is, I always wait until the green light.
Go right ahead. We'll get the green light going. There you go.
My name is Erin Gilligan Morin. I happen to be one of the large landowners up in South Morro Hills. I've been there since I was a baby in 72. But my family started farming in the early 70s. They were my family was well activated with one of the of making South Morro Hills the way it is. My father, Bill Gilligan, he was one of the men that was in this meeting drafting South Morro Hills with the 2.5 acre subdivision plan. It was 40 years ago. And I continue with Louise Bama and Larry and our meetings, and they're saying that it's out of date, and I agree, it is out of date. And we do need a vision plan. We do need massive road improvements. We need bike lanes. We need things. But for the housing element, I'm really, for the acreage that Louise is bringing up is the 1 acre, but I'm more towards a 1.5 to 2 acre lot subdivision, 30 acre. I really like what Michelle Keeler's been saying in the past at our meetings and things like that. We have to start somewhere. Even though farming's not gonna be sustainable forever, but because of the fires and because that we have Santa Ana winds and we have winds that are about 25 to 30 knots, up in where my ranch is, we have hills and there's valleys. I mean, deep, steep valleys to hills to things, and there's winds and fire danger, and anything that starts smoking around us, boom, we're just like right there. So we need evacuation routes. There's a lot of planning that we really have to get into Morrill Hill. But I do agree that we should start somewhere. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers, Scott, or is that concluded?
That concludes all the speakers.
What about me?
Larry.
I'm sorry?
Larry Balma.
You want to allow Mr. Balma to speak?
Larry, go ahead, Larry.
You have 3 minutes.
I'm Larry Balma, president of South Morrill Hills Association. I live at 745 Sleeping Indian Road, South Morrill Hills, Oceanside. A general plan update for any city is a huge undertaking, especially a city the size of Oceanside with all of our diversity. We have commercial, industrial, airport, train and bus stations, oceanfront, a pier, harbor, soccer fields, parks, skate parks, and our agricultural area in South Morrill Hills. Every other North County city must be envious. I realize how much time and effort it has taken to assemble everyone's input and find ways to reach our goals sustainably and within the city budget. Number one is to provide a safe and secure environment. Even the best plan is based on assumptions on what types of changes will occur in the future. So the plan must also be resilient and sustainable. Electric power, grid and solar, fossil fuel use, vehicular volume, water use, all affect our carbon footprint. South Morrill Hills agriculture helps us immensely with Oceanside's carbon footprint. Our existing South Morrill Hills plan has no provision to conserve any agricultural land, period. The proposed South Morrill Hills community plan will conserve 70% of our land for agriculture. If our South Morrill Hills community plan was in place when North River Farms came, they would only have been entitled to build about 180 homes clustered on the 200 and something acres, not almost 600 homes. I thank the entire staff from every department in Oceanside for their work with our Agrivision Committee. We look forward to work with you on the continuing general plan process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, any other speakers that we know of?
How about me?
Oh, yep. Who is me, if you could identify yourself?
Wayne Godney.
Go ahead.
Wayne Godney?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the time here. I'm involved with the Wayne Godney in Oceanside. I'm involved with Save Our Streets, which was created in the back gate area when Dan Besant was shot and killed, December 2006. Also, the Oceanside Samoan Cultural Celebration, and we have our event, a week-long event every year. Melba Bishop, back gate area, culminating down at the band shell. Been very busy recently on the beach band shell improvement situation, with the Junior South Beach Community Center and the band shell. Also things in the neighborhood, and we're coming out of the pandemic now. So I think it was a wonderful update for me to just kind of weigh in tonight. We haven't been involved with any of these topics or issues recently. We've been focused more on the parks and recreation issues in the community. But with regard to the report by Mr. Cunningham and the mention of parks and recreation, partnership with the Oceanside Police Department, safety and security, those fall in line with some of the discussions that we've been having very intense discussions with regard to the needs of the parks and recreation, the quality of life issues in the neighborhoods where we were focused which is Crown Heights neighborhood, East Side, Libby Lake, the Deep Valley, Backgate, and John Landis Park. We have people that are involved with Save Our Streets in all of those areas, and also the Samoan Committee. Back in 2018, we participated in 3 months worth of the workshops for the Parks and Rec Master Plan. We feel that we're in there as a stakeholder. We haven't been contacted as an organization or a group. And so that's why I'm kind of weighing in and calling tonight. Would love to meet with somebody and to kind of share an update on some of the things that we're focused on. We'll be at the Parks and Rec Commission tomorrow night. But we see how things relate now to housing, quality of life with regard to Parks and Rec, youth organizations, and some of the teams and fields that we have in these neighborhoods. So just along those lines, I was glad to be able to weigh in tonight. We won't miss the next meeting in October, but I think it's important with the general plan amendment that we at least have a say in all of that. And there's a lot of things that we've compiled with the experience over the years, and love to convey and share that. To be part of just this discussion. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wilson. Okay, is there a way for our speakers to raise their hand, maybe instead of waiting for them to shout out?
Yeah, there's a raise hand option
Okay.
that can be done. But as far as the speakers that signed up, that is the rest of the speakers that signed in earlier.
I do see other names here is why I'm asking. So
Yeah.
if you're listening in and you're participating on Zoom and you would like to speak on this item, if you could do the raise your hand option, and we'll give you a minute to do that, because we do see some speakers or people participating that didn't weigh in yet. So we'll see their hand over there on the right area if they do raise their.
Yeah,
Okay.
it'll be on the right-hand side. Oh,
Okay.
there we have
I
someone.
see one. So go ahead and call on.
Okay, Amy, I'm sorry if I...
It's Craig. It's okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Amy.
Just really quick, I think that anytime we're looking at building or whatnot, again, I'm not a big fan of building back on our farmland. We definitely need it. I come from Orange County. I moved down here for almost 16 years ago due to the fact of lots of building, lots cost of housing, things like that. And Oceanside kind of provided me as a single female the ability to purchase a home down here. And now, I know in the presentation that Russ did about affordable and having, how do we ensure, sorry, my dog's going to bark in just a second. How do we ensure that Oceanside residents can purchase, if we do build homes, how do we ensure that Oceanside residents are the ones that get these low income affordable housing and not investors or other people that can kind of come in and kind of take over? I'm afraid that what's going to happen here is like what happened in Orange County, even after the market crash, where prices went down and investors bought up. The other thing I know for sure I wanted to discuss is that if developers do come in, when they do their environmental reports, impact reports, I think especially with North River Farms, my neighborhood would be primarily affected by the extra traffic coming through. I live right near the park, Mance Buchanan Park, by the middle school. And we're the only way to cut through from College over to Frazee or Frazee over to College and miss the whole 76 College traffic jam. And so my neighborhood would have been directly impacted by the extra traffic from 1,400 plus cars. How do we ensure that when they do environmental impacts reports on these areas, that they're really looking at not just the main streets, but the true neighborhoods? Because quality of life to me is being able to get through my neighborhood and being able to get to my home without having to wait, or dodge cars that are waiting for school to pick up their kids from school and things like that. So how do we ensure, is there a way to ensure that when we're starting to look at some of these plans? So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, is there a way to take that hand down and then we can see if there's any others? There we go. Thank you. I don't see any other hands. Let's give it this one last round, and then we'll assume that's it.
An email that came in from Bridget, who is trying to log in. I just sent her the link. So
Okay.
if Bridget can get in, hopefully we can hear her speak.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. We're going to try to get Bridget in real quickly. Give her a minute. If she can't get in, then I think we'll go ahead and proceed to discussion. Okay, I think at this point, I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners, both here in the chambers and online, and see what their take is on what's been presented now, or this evening, including public comments. Anybody like to tee up the discussion? Don't all jump at once. I saw a hand. There we go. Commissioner Hayes, you are welcome to kick it off. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I thought this was a nice segue based on Amy's comments, because I think lately what we've all seen in the planning world, and especially with state legislations that are coming down and really impacting how we do our planning, is we've lost track to some extent of what it means for quality of life and us being able to move around within our community. So mobility is one of my biggest concerns. We're really focused on the corridors, which is great, and making sure that we have access to our transit stations, the upgrade to Oceanside Station. But we know that the majority of us are still getting around in our cars. And things like Mission Vista High School being on an island require us to get around by cars and to drop our kids off at school in a car. So I think the one thing that I heard from Amy is college. And many of us that live on this side of town rely on that heavily to be able to access the southern part of the city, or those down south to access the northern part on this eastern side. There's a lot of focus on Coast Highway and on those major corridors. But I think it was really disheartening, and many of you know from our last hearing that the Melrose extension, one of the reasons why I was so concerned about it being deleted is because that was envisioned 30 years ago for example, with the growth in Morrow Hills that's being anticipated. To put even more pressure on college, there's also the Rancho del Oro extension or connection to 78 that's being fought and might be deleted. So as we start deleting more and more of these segments that were supposed to help balance out our traffic, I mean, you can drive down College during non-peak hours and it can take you 10 minutes to get, to 78. If you go in during those rush hours, it's 30 to 45 minutes. So as we put more and more pressure on those corridors, I mean, even if we put bus service on those, the buses would go as slow. So I'm just curious as to how staff has really taken a close look, because we know under California Environmental Quality Act, they don't care about congestion and the delay anymore. It's really focused on the emissions associated with moving around. So I would just like to see more of what's being done with that north-south circular and how closely we're going to analyze what's needed to support the additional land development, especially in the eastern side of the city. So that's one piece. I have just 2 more points and then I'll pass it off to somebody else.
Sure.
The other thing, and I know I'm going to give Russ or whoever a chance to respond to these two. The other one is a completely different subject, and I think it's a really interesting one that Russ brought up with retail and office. Basically, those commercial uses that have been so significantly impacted by COVID-19. A lot more of us are working from home, and a lot more of us are shopping from home online. So we're seeing our retail is shuttering or declining significantly. It's really easy to go Christmas shopping now at the mall. Never used to be. And we're also seeing a lot more vacancy in our office space. So how is that being considered in our plan, and specifically with some of these mixed use, like the one that we approved earlier this evening? Would it have made more sense for that to have been one more residential unit than it was to try to force office into a place where we might not need it? So I'm wondering how that's being looked at. And then the one other piece I had was with South Morrow Hills workforce housing. So it came up with that affordable housing question that was raised in one of the discussions earlier. I do understand that there was some workforce housing farm help that was being considered as part of that. So just wondering what's being done to help promote that and how that might be helping us to meet some of our requirements under RENA. That's it. I think I'm done.
Thank you. Russ, I made notes. Did you hear all that? Do you want to address those as best you can, or Scott or Jeff?
Sure, I'll try to do so as succinctly as I can. Commissioner Hayes, thank you for the comments regarding College Boulevard. The city recently approved improvements to College Boulevard, widening, I think essentially from Old Grove down toward the 78 corridor. Of course, in those discussions, the RDO interchange always looms large. The RDO interchange is currently in our circulation element. There's a lot of discussion to be had going forward on the fate of that interchange, and I think it'll have a great deal to do with what comes out of the regional transportation modeling that's underway in support of the regional plan that I mentioned in my presentation. And we will be utilizing that modeling to make assumptions, conduct assessments, and make assumptions about future traffic volumes in Oceanside. So that work is forthcoming. We agree that we don't want to get too fixated on the east-west corridor such that we forget about these important north-south arteries through the city and how important they are to roadway connectivity in the city. We certainly appreciate the comments about commercial space, the general lack of demand for commercial space. Several economic studies have been conducted, including the technical study for this project, which speak to a surplus of commercial zoning and concurrently a deficit of industrial zoning. So we're looking for creative ways to allow a kind of flex zoning regime in some of our currently zoned commercial areas that would accommodate 21st century light industrial, low impact use, 21st century maker space that could live very well with commercial development. So that's one of the thoughts regarding finding that right balance between commercial and industrial zoning. You mentioned the project that Scott brought forward tonight. We were really obliged to require that there be a commercial component in that project because it is ostensibly a commercial district. But as I said earlier, we are looking as part of the corridor's plan to, we're studying the viability of segments of these corridors, allowing for standalone residential as the Coast Highway Incentive District provides for in that corridor. I think there's there's also a comment about workforce housing, which I think speaks to, Commissioner, I'm not sure if you were referring specifically to South Morrow Hills or just citywide, but certainly in our thinking about the South Morrow Hills area, should housing allowances beyond those that exist today ultimately be supported, we would do everything we could to make that housing as accommodating of the full spectrum of need, of housing need in our community, including workforce housing for folks that may be working in agriculture or in agritourism in that area.
Can I follow up with one more question back on the transportation piece?
Sure.
Okay. I know you mentioned how you're looking at College down by 78, but I think that the most congestion that most of us deal with if you're trying to go north-south is at 76 and then at Oceanside Boulevard, and especially trying to access Emerald, because since we don't have Melrose that goes all the way south, Emerald tends to be the next best thing to get down. So it's really that piece of it that I'd like the city to focus more on and trying to figure out how to solve some of that, because as we develop more over here, anything that gets approved out in South Morrow Hills or anywhere, that anything that's going to use College, even El Corazon, any more pressure on College is just, I don't know how you're going to alleviate that in the two most congested intersections without doing something else. So I don't know if you're thinking of doing some kind of micro simulation to try to figure out some other solutions. But right now, I don't know how you can widen College anymore at Oceanside Boulevard or try to alleviate. You've already talked about it, and we've already heard Hamid talk about how there isn't any opportunities to fix it at 76. So what are the solutions and what's being looked at?
I appreciate these comments because it's easy for some of us who have been in the community for 22 years to think that, you know, we really understand the community. And I'm constantly reminded and humbled by comments like these that remind me that there are corners of the city where I don't spend a lot of time, and I'm not necessarily that familiar with some of these dynamics that you're speaking of. So I've noted your comment. I'll be speaking with our transportation subconsultants, Chen Ryan, about any possibility of doing some focused assessment of this segment of College Boulevard.
Thank you.
I had, I guess, a question for the consultant, which I think you said is with us this evening or online. First of all, I would say the framework of what was presented, the themes and guiding principles, they work very well, I think. They're comprehensive. I think they link together, in my mind, with kind of where we'd like the city to be, so well thought out. I guess the question I have for the consultant is, looking at the themes and the guiding principles, were these crafted uniquely to Oceanside? Is this kind of the approach for any entity going through this process? I guess I'm most interested in trying to understand, is this just a template, or is it uniquely Oceanside that we're seeing these things here in front of us? So maybe the question's to you, Russ, or the consultant, either one.
Well, I definitely want to hear Rajiv weigh in, and I really appreciate the question because it gives me another opportunity to emphasize the extent to which we really have tried to create a pathway to plans that are very focused on what is unique about this city, both in terms of constraints, assets, opportunities. I mentioned that one of our elements will be called the remarkable community element, where we really want to, and this is, obviously the state doesn't require a remarkable community element.
Yeah.
But we think that this is something that really speaks to what we've heard from the community about what makes Oceanside a unique place, and how we can go about, again, preserving and enhancing those assets that people are very invested in. But I'll let Rajiv respond to that as well.
I think Russ has responded. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hi. I think staff has really pushed us to be creative and Oceanside focused in the process, and I would say that the vision and the guiding principles have resulted as much from a staff contribution as our consultant contribution. And I would say it isn't like we just drafted these and we gave these to city staff. At multiple points in the process, we really had sessions, brainstorming sessions with city staff. Okay, we've heard this and we've heard that, and what are the themes that are rising through? So it's been a very much from the ground up kind of a crafting of these visions and principles. So they don't, I mean, yes, we do visions and guiding principles in other communities, but this is very much crafted for Oceanside. This is not following a template from any other place. And I know city staff is very interested in the general plan that's thematic, that reflects Oceanside's values and the values that have arisen through this outreach process. And we will work with city staff to make sure that that can happen. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm glad to hear this, because that was my concern, that we would craft something that didn't reflect kind of what Oceanside was. I guess the second half of my question would be, if we haven't gone through this exercise for many, many years, really we haven't gone through this exercise. We're creating this now. We'll have this guiding document to guide us over the next, I guess that's where my question is going. How alive is what we're doing here and the process and the documentation afterwards, that we can confidently say over the next, 50 years, this is really who we are and this is where we need to be, et cetera. Again, that's kind of what I'm looking for here, well beyond my time here, that Oceanside continue to use this as the roadmap for a very long time.
Yes, and Chair Rosales, as I said, this is a first-time effort on the part of the city. We've never comprehensively updated our general plan, and we have these other important components addressing South Morrow Hills and our corridors. What is largely driving our time frame for the project, I'll back up a little bit and say, state guidance is to update a general plan every 15 to 20 years. That's challenging to do given the amount of resources you have to devote to it. So most cities don't achieve that. And we certainly haven't been able to achieve that. But with the regional planning organization looking at 2050, 2050 has long been, from a regional standpoint, kind of that horizon to which we can kind of roughly predict how much population growth we're going to see, how much housing we're going to need, what sort of impact that growth is going to have on our roadways and other transportation facilities, et cetera. So that we're aligned with the regional vision, and so we can utilize the data that comes from SANDAG through the traffic modeling that I mentioned earlier. Our horizon is 2050, though I would say this, the regional plan looks out to 2050, but by state law, the regional plan has to get updated every 4 years. So we're not necessarily saying that the city doesn't go through another long-range planning process for another 29 years, but rather that we are thinking that far out. Does that respond to your question pretty well?
That's very helpful. Thank you. Commissioner Obama, you.
Okay, I have a couple of comments. First off, thanks to staff and the consultants for doing such an excellent job going through the community workshops and listening to everybody's wants and needs. And what you guys have come up with is remarkable, and it's great, and I'm so proud of Oceanside, so thanks for all your work. One of the things based on the remarkable community, like as far as what we've been talking about a lot tonight, or at least what a lot of the people have spoken about, is our farmland and our farming community. It is a true gift to Oceanside, and with the work being done in the South Morrow Hills Community Plan, we are working to provide an economic and sustainable way for farmers and farming to remain in the fabric of Oceanside, and that's important. Agritourism, which was just one tool in the toolbox that we're hoping to achieve a little bit deeper than what it already has been, what already is allowed in Oceanside, is to go a little bit deeper with that. That would actually be another true asset for Oceanside going forward. But there's a couple other things that I just thought I'd touch upon, and one is that 60% of the surfboard manufacturers in the country are in Oceanside, which is pretty remarkable to have that many and that strong of a vibe of surfing here, as well as skateboarding was actually the epicenter was in North County, and skateboarding in Oceanside was also a very vibrant area where a lot of the technological advances actually happened. So to me, like agritourism, surfing, skateboarding are just two more like assets and opportunities for Oceanside. And as far, I know you did it pictorially inside of the program that you guys put together. It shows the skateboarder on Pier View and it shows the surf museum. So I really appreciate it. I know you guys are picking up on that, but that's just something that I think is kind of strong elements of Oceanside, our agritourism, which we hope to develop and have this great thing, and then those other sports that are now in the Olympics. But on another subject that's kind of more controversial and maybe more of my soapbox is like when you look at your organizing themes, right? Like number 13, minimize risks associated with natural hazards and human induced hazards. I read that one pretty good. And number 14, create safe and secure public spaces. And also from the community outreach, we had the lead vision statement, I think was, the first one was like the safety and security of public spaces. And now, and you touched upon the homeless thing, and it's kind of more of a social thing. But the homeless thing is kind of getting to the point where I think it's spinning into the world of just like, we just keep throwing money at this and hopefully it's going to go away. But there are people out there that really need our help and support, and they're so glad to get it. And those are the people I think we should continue to embrace and bring into our world and try to get them out of that. But there's a lot of them, and I know we all know them. I've met them myself, that just want to be left alone. They don't want to play by our laws. They don't want to do anything more than live where they want to live, and they want to pollute our streams and our resources and taking advantage of things like now they can steal up to, what, $950 without even going to jail. I mean, there's a lot of that, and we keep throwing money and resources at that thinking it's going to go away, but it's not. They're taking advantage of it. So those kinds of people, we need to figure out something that we can actually encapsulate them and actually put them into something where maybe they want to maybe come back to society and maybe be part of us again. Because right now we're enabling them to become hopeless, homeless forever, and just being able to be like the Mad Maxes of the world. And I don't want to see Oceanside or any city kind of continue to go on that path. And so Oceanside needs to join with other cities and to push our state and our federal government to like, let's just like tackle those people, not the ones that need it, not the ones that we all feel in our heart that we want to help, but the ones that are like just, playing us, as I should say. So anyway, that's my soapbox. And that wasn't, it just, because you had such a strong element in our vision statements about these public spaces, and people really want those to be secure and safe and for their kids. And like, you can't, like going on the bike trail, like you feel like, I don't know if I want to try that, because I've heard all these horror stories about people getting accosted. So it's kind of a drag to have to, and our poor police guys, you can't just keep throwing it on them. We, society, have to start figuring out ways that we can actually get these people, kind of like, I don't know, uncomfortable, is that's what it's called? Maybe just be a little uncomfortable. They might want to change their idea that they can just run our city. Anyway, sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, I do think the city is working toward a comprehensive approach to this issue. And I'm not going to play attorney here, but I am aware of some case law that, and this may be something that our city attorney can speak to a little bit, but our pursuit of a shelter, our pursuit of an option for the housing community, I think may give us some opportunity on the enforcement side of things that really hasn't been available to us legally, because we haven't been able to point to an option for the homeless community. So I think that, again, we want to take a humane approach, but we also want to take an approach that's consistent with the law and our obligations under the law. And I think that's one reason why we're pursuing a shelter, because I think will give us more leverage on the enforcement side than we presently have.
I hope so. I hope it actually gets these people to kind of change their ideas and maybe want to come back into society and be part of us, be part of the law abiding and all of that, because it's really kind of sad right now with all of it. But anyway, thank you for all your work.
Commissioners Goodkind, Rains, any input, comments?
Well, I would just say I also want to thank, this is Commissioner Goodkind, thank staff, Russ and team, and our consultant for this tremendous effort. I am just curious from kind of a practical perspective how planners across the state and planning consultants are approaching the challenge of kind of keeping up with what looks like a trajectory at the state level, at the state policy level, of having more and more control over what cities can do in terms of development and planning. I'm just wondering what's going on in your field to kind of address that phenomenon.
Chair and Commissioners, I think there's a number of approaches that we're seeing. First of all, the obvious response is we are mandated to update our zoning ordinances and adopt new regulations, and even if we don't, we're mandated to implement them. A number of cities, not necessarily at the planning level, but at the more elected official level, are offering comments on legislation as it's going through the process. Going back to the planners, it's interesting to see the responses from the planners, and I'm speaking broadly now from my experience from at conferences, et cetera. There's a strong sentiment from community planners that the state is taking away local control. And a lot of planners find that offensive or objectionable, maybe is a better word. At the same time, there's a number of planners who recognize that there is a housing crisis, and the state is responding to the state's perspective that local officials are listening too strongly to the local opposition around housing projects, and therefore the projects are getting denied when they shouldn't be. So the state is then saying, well, we're going to change the table then. I was at a state conference a couple of years ago, and Senator Wiener was one of the speakers at the conference, and he was not apologetic in any sense of the word. He was not defiant either, but he gave his reasoning, which I basically just summed up. And I'd estimate half the planners in the room stood up and gave him a standing ovation at the end of his speech. So there are some city planners who say we have a housing crisis and we need to deal with it, and the local officials aren't dealing with it. And then there's other city planners who say, well, they're taking away local control, and that's not right. So,
yeah. Great, thank you. Commissioner Raines, anything?
Just a thought, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to push back a little bit on what Eric and I do as far as preserving farmland just as a means to itself. I'm not necessarily opposed to preserving farmland, but I think it should be based on, some type of data or some type of, facts, not just nostalgia or feel. So while we were hearing from people, I looked up the California Agricultural Lobby, which is, of course, supporting farmers. And they know that there's been a 10% decline in farms in California specifically since 2012. Doesn't give a reason, but I think that's a good fact to know. That family farms in general make up 90% of California farms, and those are on the decline. So that's just the reality of it. And if it was profitable, more people would be doing it. We'd be seeing an increase in family farms or even corporate farms. But you're not seeing that. So what are we going to do with the land? Like, you can't just let it sit idle. As we discussed earlier, we need to use the land more appropriately. Many things can be said as to why, the farming is on decline. One of the biggest reasons is water. Can't grow food without water, right? But the double-edged sword of that is you can't build more houses without water either. So I would probably classify the water crisis as greater or equal to anything having to do with the climate. But, I think unfortunately, I think for the water, can solve it through technology. We saw desalination plants opening up in Carlsbad, our neighbor. So maybe we could do something along those lines, maybe work with Camp Pendleton, maybe get something built over there. More reservoirs obviously would be a boon for water and specifically farming, or more housing if we need it. And then, so that's just kind of my general thoughts. I think it should be maybe focused more on specific solutions to the effects of the climate, as opposed to just general rhetoric, rah, rah, rah. It really doesn't get us anywhere. I think if we have specific solutions to specific problems, I think it kind of gets us down the road a little bit better. And then just one comment to Commissioner Obama's comment. Luckily, I can play attorney, and I deal with it quite a bit. The 950 rule, so it's not technically correct what you said. It is still a crime to steal $1 or more. The legislature, however, in their esteemed wisdom, decided to increase the limit from would make it a felony to above 950. So it used to be 400. That's the level it would be rise to a felony conduct, felony theft, and now it is misdemeanor all the way to 950. So just to clarify that, so you can still be arrested and go to jail. It's just the penalty is much less, if anything at all. But that's it.
But how come? Can I ask him a question? It's kind of hard to ask someone a question on Zoom. Commissioner Raines, thank you so much for that information, and I do understand what you were saying, but it's like when you talk to store owners, anybody, CVS Pharmacy, I talk to some of the people there, and people that have larger companies like Target, they don't even want to pursue these people because they don't want to get their employees, number one, like in any kind of harm's way. So they let these people walk out the stores. And this happens in LA a lot too with the kind of, from what I understand, a lot of the bigger stores like Nordstrom's have a problem with that too. Well, they'll steal a purse that's worth whatever it is, maybe $920. They'll get away with it because no one wants to pursue these people because they don't, by the time you call police or whatever happens, it's just not worth it to them. So it's happening. I mean, I understand the laws and it's only a felony, but the problem is society is letting it kind of happen because it's just they don't want to put themselves in harm's way to try to stop that guy. I mean, I don't know what I'd do if I was a small business owner, like a small liquor store or something, and have this guy come in and steal liquor and let him walk out the store because I don't have time to get around the counter and try to pursue him or maybe even get stabbed over it. So it's an issue.
No, that's okay. Okay, I'm going to wrap up my comments with a couple of, and mine aren't unique. They're just borrowing from others that I heard that I want to just emphasize as going forward, kind of bringing into the plan. Climate change and its impacts, I think there probably needs to be a very strong component of that and weaved into all elements of what we're doing. I think it's here and we're having to deal with it. And so let's make sure that it's in the background all the time. The homeless issue, as Commissioner Obama alluded to, I know the city's working on a number of things, but real solutions that are regionally based, I think, is kind of where Oceanside should position itself. It just makes sense going forward that, multiple strategies are utilized to deal with the homeless issue because it's here, it's prevalent, and it's very complex as well. So we need different and many strategies. The last thing, and again, borrowing from Commissioner Obama, she mentioned the surfboard and skateboard community. I would add to that the beach community of Oceanside itself. It is that. But it's quickly going away, if you will. So if we're talking about remarkable communities, that's what Oceanside is, first and foremost, as a beach community, with those elements very much in the background. We're part of that community. So the emphasis in trying to retain where we can that feel of a beach community in the livable spaces, in the corridors, I think is a really important vision to maintain, not let that go, if you will. So again, where we can weave that in to the different elements of what we're doing here, I think is important.
Any question?
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
So I want you to know, Louise, that it wasn't lost on me where you went. And as far as, I think a lot of what you had to say is beyond this.
It was a soapbox.
But you know what I think? I think the problem is, and I think, Russ, you hit on it. You don't usually talk to the Oceanside Police Department about these things, but I think it's time. It seems like this country was built on rule of law, but now it seems like it's going to the rule of man, and we're just changing things that this country wasn't. And now this isn't the soapbox, but it's not how this country was founded. I mean, You go in and you steal something from somebody's business, that's not right. And I heard, I don't know if it's true or not, Target's pulling out of California. I don't know if that's true or not. But I would hope that Oceanside just retains its family, ocean town, and it's safe to go down to the beaches. It's safe to be out at night. And this defund the police is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. The people that want the police are the very people that are held hostage, that live in the poor areas, and they're hostage and they're in bondage to the people that run around with guns that shouldn't have them or being knuckleheads. So that's my 2 cents worth. And you know what? The other thing is that we voted on this, and I think it was Jolene had a lot to say about it. I didn't know a lot about this north-south corridor. She brought it up again tonight about college. Whatever, didn't we vote as a planning commission that we keep that north-south corridor? Was that Melrose?
It was Melrose Extension after this whole planning was done.
But so my question is, we voted to keep that element. I guess the city council voted against it. Why? That's one point. And the other thing, I, like you, Tom, when I heard this, I almost felt like, our plan. It sounds like, is that for Oceanside? I was thinking the exact same thing that you were. I think, to your point, staff, Russ, that you're having the meetings around town, but the fact that, college is so congested on the north-south corridor, and maybe we don't know about it. So how do we make sure that the folks that are using that north-south corridor, and if we do have more housing, in your backyard, and has to be an evacuation, how's the north-south going to work now that they took the element out? So I don't know if this is the right time to talk about why, we eliminated that, or we didn't. The council did, but. And maybe this isn't the right time, but those are my comments.
City planner.
Can I make one quick comment to that? Sorry for interrupting, but.
Yeah, and then we'll go to the city planner. Go ahead, Jolene.
Thank you, Tom. I just want to say, first of all, to our chair tonight, thank you for letting some of the people that called in without requesting a speaker card speak, because I didn't realize that we had a deadline for being able to speak in front of the city council. And I was waiting for clarification from Barbara, the legal, to make sure that I could speak after having already spoken on the topic in front of Planning Commission. I got that approval a few minutes after 4, and at 4:20, I emailed Zeb and asked if I could speak. And he said I missed the 4 o'clock deadline. And the only way for me to do it was in person. And I was up at John Wayne Airport picking somebody up from the airport. So I would have been the only person there speaking in favor of at least keeping it for consideration as part of the circulation element. And it was really disheartening to me just to know that many of the voices of people that are concerned about college and not really truly understanding Melrose weren't heard that night. So this is part of the reason why I'm bringing it up again. I think it really needs to be looked at more closely as part of the mobility element update to figure out if Melrose is now deleted, how are we going to deal with this? But thanks.
Thank you. City planner, did you want to add something to that?
In response to Commissioner Morrissey's question, the Planning Commission did vote to recommend that the Melrose extension be kept in the circulation element until the circulation element was looked at comprehensively as part of the general plan update. The City Council voted against that, or they voted to remove the Melrose extension. A number of their comments spoke to the difference in impacts by removing it. We're not much greater, and in some instances actually reduced. The cost of implementing it was very large. That came into play. I heard a number of comments about that. land would have to be condemned, including parkland, county parkland would have to be condemned. And there's also some sentiments that it just wasn't a feasible extension in the long run, and that it gives a false modeling of our future traffic projections when you can allocate a percentage of that future traffic to an extension that really isn't going to exist. So it gives you a false result in your modeling. So those are some of the comments that I heard from council.
Thank you.
Thanks for that feedback.
I have a few comments now that we're sort of going towards our soapboxes. I agree with both of yours on the homeless and the police, but really I'm wondering how you can pull a plan like this together. We're supposed to get affordable housing, but we don't want to give up, not we, but people want affordable housing. They don't want to give up the farmland. So you need the land to put the affordable housing. You're infringing on people's, not you, but in general I'm speaking, infringing on property rights. You know, the homeless need shelter, but of course there's no way we can have enough shelter for all the homeless or for all the affordable housing that's needed to help the homeless. You know, we want to reduce traffic, but the more we reduce the roads and therefore trying to reduce the traffic, we make the cars idle longer, so they're putting out more emissions in my mind. And it just seems like a lot of stuff about to crash together, and can it really all be done? Is my question, I guess.
Those comments, Commissioner Custer, I think align pretty well with, as I said in my presentation, folks who have said we can get behind additional housing growth if that housing is going to meet the needs that exist, across the income spectrum. So we're in the process of revisiting our inclusionary housing standards. We are demonstrating through the housing element and the housing sites inventory that indeed we have the land resources in the corridors, in the urbanized areas to accommodate the roughly 5,400 units we are expected to accommodate through zoning through this next 8-year housing cycle. But of course, the city doesn't build most of that housing, right? We have engaged in partnerships with affordable housing developers to implement projects like Mission Cove and La Mission and a few others. But generally, we rely on the private sector to get this housing built. It's somewhat heartening to us as planners to see the city council take an interest in the affordability issue and to direct us to look at ways to make it a little bit more attractive for the market rate developers to actually meet their inclusionary requirement with the provision of actual housing rather than just paying the in lieu fee. So that's part of the strategy. Other strategies include streamlining the development review process and streamlining the CEQA process, which we intend to do through the programmatic EIR for the general plan updates, so that projects generally will have their CEQA covered by that programmatic document and will not have to prepare project-specific CEQA documents. And we are looking at strategic infrastructure improvements that might relieve some of the burden on the development community. It is typically the case, as you know, when a property is developed, that there are off-site improvements that often have to be made, and those typically are borne, those costs are borne by the developers. To the extent that we can strategically look at where we need to upsize water infrastructure or make frontage improvements that will facilitate the kind of development, redevelopment, and revitalization we want to see, that's something we're going to be looking at as well. But obviously in all of that, no silver bullet.
No. And this, if SB 9 passes, where are all those cars going to park on the streets that are already overcrowded when they have additional houses behind the single family, in the single family?
Yeah, it's a fair question. Again, some preliminary analysis suggests that the ability to implement projects under the provisions of SB 9 might not be as widespread as one might initially think. So we'll be looking more into that.
Well, that's really thoughts. I just think, how's it all going to come together? Right. And make everybody happy. But we'll see.
We're hoping to make everybody a little bit unhappy. That's when we usually know
you did something right.
Yeah.
You said, Jeff, the best plan makes nobody happy or something like that. You said that once before. I thought it was brilliant when you said that.
You're kind of paraphrasing me. Maybe if both sides aren't completely happy. I mean, I don't think our intent is that both sides are unhappy.
Okay.
Nobody gets everything they want.
Right.
If I could just offer a little response to Commissioner Custer, the long-range plan, the general plan update, in 20 years, the city's not going to be nirvana or heaven on earth. It's not going to solve all our problems, obviously, but I think it's going to make it a lot better, and I think we will accomplish a lot of the plan. We're not going to accomplish everything in it, but I think we'll be better off than we were with the current plan.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's a good framework, and I think it speaks to a lot of things that need to be tackled and looked at. And so with that, I'll turn to you, Russ and Jeff. Do you have enough in terms of feedback from the public and from the commissioners to get a sense of what you hopefully was a good discussion back and forth?
It really was, and we never know what to expect with these discussion items, but, I'm very pleased with what we've heard from the community and from you, commissioners. Thank you for your thoughtful comments. And I would just add to what City Planner just said and say that, we're not going to create Shangri-La here through a plan, but hopefully what we afford you and other decision makers is clearer direction so that your decisions are ones that you can confidently make that are based on what you understand to be the vision and that are a vision that's embedded in the values and priorities of the community and reflected in these documents. So that's going to help staff with the recommendations we make. Hopefully helps you in the decisions that you make on development projects and programs, et cetera, and the city council as well.
Well, you have a daunting task, and just like you said, we're updating something that's how old, and yet you just mentioned in your beginning, in the last 2 years, we need less commercial, we need more industrial. I mean, how things have changed just in the last 2 years, and they're going to keep changing, and yet by the time we get this, it's already going to be outdated. So you have a tough task, and so thanks for what you're doing.
Chairman, if I could just try to sum up, what we will do as staff is summarize your comments and forward those to the City Council as part of the staff report. We're probably not going to summarize all the comments. It was a free-flowing, interesting conversation. Some of it got a little too detailed or whatever, and that's fine. Yeah. I just want to be upfront that we're probably going to make more a report on your comments on the vision plan itself. And if I may, it sounds like you're okay with the vision plan. I didn't hear a whole lot of concern about it, some specific comments, and that's fine. But I think our report is that the Planning Commission is generally okay with this, and then we'll try and sum up some of your specific comments on the vision.
I think you've got it right. Yeah, that's what we'd like you to take forward.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Very good. Okay. Well, then we'll move on to our next item under discussion. Item 6 is a presentation by City Planner Jeff on Commissioner Rain's absence starting September 17th through the middle part of November. Jeff, I'll let you take it.
So we received a request from Commissioner Rains, and I'll turn it over to him in just a minute. He's apparently going to be conducting Air Force officer training from September 17 to November 19 and be unavailable to attend the commission meetings either in person or via Zoom. So during that time, there would be 4 commission meetings, September 27, the 2 meetings in October, and the first meeting in November. Your Planning Commission bylaws require any commissioner to notify the chair or the Planning Commission, and we appreciate both. If you intend to be absent, and I would like to editorialize for just a second here, that most of you are really good at this, and it's really helpful and beneficial, so we appreciate that. Going on the bylaws, it says any planning commissioner's appointment may terminate if the member is absent 3 consecutive meetings without sufficient cause and or notification. So again, Commissioner Raines is going to be absent 4 meetings. Your bylaws say there needs to be sufficient cause and or notification. And so that's what we're here to discuss. Essentially, I mean, he's provided the notification, so is there sufficient cause? And with that, unless the chair wants to interject, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Raines.
No, thanks for that clarification and walking us through the bylaws. That's helpful to understand. Commissioner Raines, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to it. It seems fairly straightforward to me. You've alerted us to it. The bylaws have language that indicates that there's a process that you've obviously followed. So anything that you want to add to that?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little bit of background. You may or may not know I was enlisted Air Force for 13 years, so I just recently got accepted to the JAG program. Of course, now I have to start over as an officer, which means my basic training experience from enlisted, no, it doesn't carry over. So I have to go to officer basic training, which is essentially what this is, where they take your cell phone away and they take your computer and your email. So it's pretty stressful considering I have a lot of stuff going on. But I'm doing my best to make it work with the family, career, and everything, and of course the commission. So yeah, I appreciate if you guys letting me go and being okay with it, and come back in November, hopefully all ready to go. So.
Thank you. Do the bylaws dictate that we actually just go along with it, do a vote? What's the process in terms of just accept it and say we're okay with it?
Chairman, your bylaws are silent on how to react to this.
Okay.
I would think some kind of motion or without objection, or we need something on the record, I would think.
Okay.
Well, I would like to move that we accept Commissioner Raines's explanation as sufficient cause and appreciate the notice, and thank you for your service.
Thank you for that motion.
Second that.
And we have a second. So let's go ahead and do this formally by asking everybody's input. Commissioner Custer?
Yes.
Commissioner Goodkind, you made the motion, so I
Yes.
imagine that's a yes.
Yes.
Vice Chair
Yes.
Morrissey, yes. And Commissioner Bama?
Yes.
Commissioner Hayes?
Yes, and Commissioner Raines, thank you very much for the sacrifice you make for all of us.
And I am also a yes. I don't know if Commissioner Raines gets a vote on this or has to recuse himself.
Either way, Mr. Chairman, I will abstain.
We'll recuse you. I would imagine you're in support of it. So we've got sufficient support for this action. So with that, City Planner, I think, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Brings us to the last item on the agenda, other than adjournment, and that's commissioners' reports. I'll start off. So when we tackle an issue, we typically will make a recommendation to the city council, and they will sometimes agree and sometimes they don't agree. So I'm bringing this up because I was very interested in the debate and then the outcome of the city council's take on the Amazon project that we, as a commission, approved unanimously, and then they saw it differently. So I took the opportunity to take a look at the meeting, actually record the meetings like our own. And so that was helpful for me. But I wanted the city planner to maybe kind of walk through that process, what the city council, what information they had that we didn't have, and so forth, just for the benefit of the entire commission, because again, we voted unanimously to approve it, and based on some other information, the city council took a different tact on that. So Jeff, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the approval by the Planning Commission of the Amazon project was appealed, 3 separate appeals to the City Council. In response to that appeal, the staff met with the Amazon consultant team, and we talked to them about getting better information, more accurate information based on the proposal, and in terms of, particularly in terms of traffic, but there were some other CEQA impacts as well. The City Council noted the discrepancies in some of those numbers, and they felt that there was enough uncertainty with those numbers that they weren't comfortable certifying the EIR. So there are, or the addendum, pardon me, the addendum to the EIR. So they voted to not certify it in their resolution. It focused almost entirely on CEQA. They did, at the end of the resolution, note that those same lack of accurate or contradictory, inconsistent data supported the, or offered a lack of support for the conditional use permit findings that speak to public facilities and services being adequate. But it really was based on CEQA. It was also based on new or different information than the Planning Commission had, and I'll editorialize a little. There wasn't any bashing of the Planning Commission or staff that this was an erroneous or stupid decision. They just had different information at that point, and they felt uncomfortable.
Thank you. Yeah, and one thing I did hear was that this is the last large parcel in that development that's still available, and so it was approved a long time ago. There's obviously been a lot of development there. Was this the best use for that last section of Ocean Ranch, or should it be something else? Which, in my mind, I started thinking, well, what would fit there? Because we did hear from some of the neighbors, about the traffic and the large size and scale of the project there, and the backup beeps from the vehicles there. A lot of things we heard, and so it's a very large site. But again, the last one. So I've been mulling in my head. Well, what would naturally fit up there going forward? So at some point, I'd be curious to know from staff, what your thinking would be on that, and maybe some others have some ideas too. But that's where I left it in my own head. Okay, thank you for that, City Planner. Vice Chair Morrissey, any reports?
No report.
No report, thank you. Commissioner Obama?
No report, but I was interested in maybe even discussing your little portion you just brought up a little further, as far as it's interesting how you, changing zoning, on that piece of land is zoned for what Amazon is. And so they went and filled out all of the paperwork and did all their due diligence, and it would fit on the site. Just like how Southmore Hills it's zoned for 1 house per 2.5 acres, but all these people we heard tonight think it just wants to be agriculture. So what happens to those other 1,100 houses that can still be built out there? Are they not thinking that there's still a lot of houses that can happen? Just like Melrose Extension went away, so now there's a lot of people that have to go to point A to point B that we don't have anymore. So I'm not sure what people are thinking, but do the city, would they ever downzone a parcel like Southmore Hills or Amazon's facility? It's too much traffic. We just kind of have to let that just go. I mean, how do you do that to a property owner? How do you change the zoning on them from what it was to something that people want? They don't want to see anything but farmland. So we can't have any more houses. So how do you do that? Or can you?
Chairman, Commissioners, downzoning does not happen very often for obvious reasons. There are different options on what could be used on the Amazon site. Well, let's talk about that one rather than the farmland. It's zoned industrial, and you made a good point that the proposal was an industrial use, But there's a whole range of industrial uses that could be allowed there. A lot of the other uses, most of the other uses in the industrial park are more self-contained and don't rely on as much outside traffic and distribution and trucks, backup beepers, et cetera. So if you look at the rest of the industrial park, there's a lot of uses that could be used on that, could be approved on that site.
Yeah. Good commentary. Thank you. Commissioner Custer.
No report.
Thank you. Commissioner Goodkind.
No report.
Thank you. Commissioner Hayes
No report.
and Commissioner Rains.
I don't have any specific report, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank my fellow commissioners for approving my absence. And just in case I didn't explain it, it's Air Force Reserve JAG. So I still get to be a criminal prosecutor when I get back and also do Air Force Reserve part-time. And JAG is an Air Force attorney. So just in case anyone did.
Thank you, Commissioner Rains, and good luck. We'll look forward to seeing you back in November. City Planner?
Quickly, your coming agenda items. On September 27th, we have 54 units, mixed use. It does have commercial on the ground floor. At 1602 South Coast Highway, this is the intersection of Moore Street and Coast Highway. I would like to note that as of now, this would be the last meeting where Zoom will be available for the public. We will still televise the meetings via KOCT, and of course, they'll be welcome in the chambers. All this is subject to change with COVID and the Delta variant, et cetera. But at this time, that's the direction I've been given. Is this the 27th will be the last use of Zoom. We still anticipate using Zoom for perhaps workshops, developers conferences, applicant meetings with the applicants, et cetera. October 11th, the variance request at 25 St. Malo is scheduled to come back. That was the one that this body asked for more information. And we have tried to set up site visits with the applicant's representative. I think they wanted a little more time, so we'll continue following up on that. October 26th, Fire Station Number 1, which is in the building right next door, where code enforcement is right now. That is proposed to come before you, and also a gas station on Seagate Road, which is just east of El Corazon Park. November 8th, the fourplex at 1611 Tremont. So that's getting close to Cassidy in South O. And then I'll try and have our annual memo on the recent legislation that was adopted and signed in 2021 at that meeting as well. Council going backwards, August 4th, we just talked about the Amazon appeal. August 18th, they did approve the zoning and municipal code amendment regarding tattoo establishments, removing the buffer from residential if there's a freeway in between. September 1, they approved the J&K Manufacturing Distribution Cannabis CUP. And again, we talked about it, but the circ element regarding Melrose extension, they approved removal of it. On September 15th, the tattoo zoning amendment will go back to the council for a resolution to send it to the Coastal Commission. That's just a housekeeping item. September 29th, there's a workshop on community choice energy. This is where the city can contract with energy providers to provide renewable energy and then offer that to their customers. Russ may know more about that if you have any questions. October 6th, we'll take the vision document that you just reviewed tonight to council for their comments. And then on November 3rd, this is a downtown zoning amendment, but it's an important one. We have gotten approval from the Coastal Commission on the amendment to remove the density cap in the downtown and also expand the transit-oriented development parking reductions. The Coastal Commission approved that with modifications. We have to bring those modifications back to the council to readopt with those modifications. They're not too onerous, so we don't anticipate that would be a contentious project. And then finally, on September 20th, we have the next meeting of the Buena Vista Lagoon Joint Powers Committee. That's a joint powers committee with Oceanside and Carlsbad. That committee is starting to get a little more active and look for projects to enhance the BV Lagoon, Buena Vista Lagoon, and also look at removal of the cattails. So you may start hearing more about that project in that committee. That's all I had.
Great, thank you for that update. Oh, Commissioner Ballmer?
Sorry, I keep, we could stay a little longer, right? Hey, didn't you say, Russ, in your presentation that in October, the Southmore Hills Community Plan draft would be brought up again? Or is that what you said, or something like that?
Yes, Commissioner Baum, I did allude to that. Dates are tentative right now, but we do think that we can gather people toward the end of October to discuss essentially next steps with Southmore Hills.
Like, when you say gather, would it be at a planning commission or just like an informal, kind of like at the library, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, we're still thinking about how we can be, most inclusive in that regard. So it could be a physical space that allows for this kind of in-person dialogue, along with remote access as well. So kind of like tonight's meeting, but we'll see.
I have one more thing before we adjourn.
Go right ahead.
Just that I won't be here on October 5th. Is that the next meeting? No, the 27th, September 27th.
Okay, I think that concludes our meeting. We are adjourned.